got the IRS operating in anything less than a neutral and nonpartisan way, then that is outrageous. It is contrary to our traditions, and people have to be held accountable, and it's got to be fixed. So we'll wait and see what exactly all the details and the facts are. But I've got no patience with it. I will not tolerate it, and we will make sure that we find out exactly what happened on this.
The President today answering questions after talking alongside the British Prime Minister, that about the IRS and allegations that the IRS targeted tax-exempt Tea Party groups and groups based on ideological political leanings. We'll start there. A lot to talk about. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Kirsten Powers, columnist for the Daily Beast. And we welcome Daniel Henninger, deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, what about this and the extent at which it goes and the president's answer today?
Well, on the IRS, it was really kind of interesting, Brett. I mean, he says he wants accountability, but it was interesting that he said essentially the same thing he did about Benghazi. We have to wait until we find out what was going on. Well, with the IRS, I think we know what was going on. And yet the president seems to have this inclination to kind of push things off into the clouds, and so they sort of fade away and the impact is lessened. After this week, Brett, the impact of Benghazi, the IRS, and finally this AP announcement, it is not going away for Barack Obama.
I mean, Kirsten, the statements are flowing from Capitol Hill, from Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, well, I think this is sort of everybody's great fear, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican and you're politically active, is that this is the kind of thing that could happen, that the IRS could target you. One of the problems is that when the IRS came out originally and said this was just a low-level issue, and then the AP has since reported, it turns out actually people at a higher level knew, and then they asked them to change it from Tea Party to, you know, things like look for limiting and expanding government and educating on the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Well, come on. I mean, you're still targeting them. So there's a lot to look into here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, focused on government spending, debt, taxes, advocacy groups focused on making America a better place to live.
Republicans.
Right, yeah, and they said it wasn't political. Look, it was clearly ideological. I mean, this is one of the things we need to find out, and Dan's right. There's got to be, I think, a huge investigation about this, and people on Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats, tripping over themselves to get in front of this so that they can be seen as leading the charge on this. I mean, I think the real question ultimately will be, who's the senior most official in the U.S. government who knew that this was taking place? We don't have a clue right now, but I suspect we'll learn probably pretty quickly.
Okay, let's turn to the other scandal he talked about today, and that is Benghazi. It was a much different tone from the president.
The day after it happened, I acknowledged that this was an act of terrorism. And what I pledged to the American people was that we would find out what happened, we would make sure that it did not happen again. Suddenly, 3 days ago, this gets spun up as if there's something new to the story. There's no there. So the whole thing defies logic. And the fact that this keeps on getting churned out, frankly, has a lot to do with political motivations.
Okay, so the president went through his timeline there today. We wanted to take some time just to play a couple of sound bites, just play them as they happened chronologically so you could listen to them.
No acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this great nation, alter that character, or eclipse the light of the values that we stand for.
Mr. President, this morning you went out of your way to avoid the use of the word terrorism in connection with the Libya attack.
Right.
Do you believe that this was a terrorist attack?
Well, it's too early to know exactly how this came about, what group was involved, but obviously it was an attack on Americans. Here's what happened. You had a video that was released by somebody who lives here, sort of a shadowy character who is extremely offensive video directed at Muhammad and Islam.
Making fun of the Prophet Muhammad.
Making fun of the Prophet Muhammad. And so this caused great offense in much of the Muslim world. But what also happened was extremists and terrorists used this as an excuse to attack a variety of our embassies, including the consulate in Libya.
We have reports that the White House said today that the attacks in Libya were a terrorist attack. Do you have information indicating that it was Iran or Al Qaeda was behind or organizing the protests?
Well, we're still doing an investigation, and there are going to be different circumstances in different countries. And so I don't want to speak to something until we have all the information. What we do know is that the natural protests that arose because of the outrage over the video were used as an excuse by extremists to see if they can also directly harm U.S. interests.
I heard Hillary Clinton say that it was an act of terrorism. Is it? What do you say?
Well, we're still doing an investigation. There's no doubt that the kind of weapons that were used, the ongoing assault, that it wasn't just a mob action. Now, we don't have all the information yet, and so we're still gathering it. There are no words that excuse the killing of innocents. There's no video that justifies an attack on an embassy.
Okay, that last one was the president at the United Nations. Okay, Steve, he also said that the talking points matched what he was getting in the presidential daily briefings.
Right. Let me add one thing to that long list. On September 20th, Jay Carney gave a gaggle, which means no cameras were present, in which he called the attacks a terrorist attack, and he was asked by the reporters in the gaggle, is this the first time the White House is using that? And according to the Poole report written by Mark Landler of the New York Times, Carney acknowledged that it was. So whatever the president is saying now, it's not what the White House was saying then, it's not what Jay Carney was saying then. I think there are two big stories coming out of the president's remarks today. He said that the talking points were a sideshow. One, you have the issue of manipulating the talking points. It's clear beyond any dispute that what happened was a manipulation of the talking points. We now have the documents, we have the emails. This is clear, and I am totally befuddled as to why the President of the United States, echoing Jay Carney, would claim that reporters aren't seeing exactly what they know that they're seeing. And I think this is doing tremendous damage to the credibility of the president with reporters who have been, in some cases, I think, cheerleaders. The second is the misrepresentation of what they've said about the talking points. I mean, this has been going on now for literally months, and the president, I think, doubled down on that today, saying, in effect, yeah, we didn't have really much to do with this. We now know that that's not true.
Kirsten.
Well, look, what I don't understand about what the president is doing is, to a certain extent, you could argue that he wasn't really involved in a lot of this stuff, but he is so centrally involving himself with these repeated lies, and I'm just going to call them lies because they're lies. They're on tape. Nobody thought that he called it a terrorist attack. Last night I went and I looked up at the New York Times how they reported it the day after. They never referenced that we've had a terrorist attack against the United States. On September 20th, however, they run a story that says Libya envoy's killing was a terrorist attack, and they say, until now, White House officials have not used that language in describing the assault. That is September 20th. That is the New York Times. Now, at what point are people going to get tired of the president coming out over and over saying things like, don't believe your lying eyes?
Dan, if in fact the presidential daily brief did match the talking points, that's a whole nother set of questions.
That's an entirely different set of questions, and I think what the president did today is force John Boehner's hand on the select committee. It's making it extremely difficult for Boehner, I think, to do anything but appoint this select committee and sort all of this out.
And didn't he also kind of challenge reporters by saying there's no there there?
Yeah. Exactly, and I think that phrase is going to come back to haunt him. But Jay Carney has been taking it in the neck across the political spectrum for making these indefensible claims. I think Jay Carney's main talking point came from his boss. Where else could it have come from? His boss reiterated it today.
Okay, next up, the verdict is in. The doctor is guilty. We'll discuss the Gosnell decision.